The project fails to create the required jobs. This is also a scenario that we've got to do everything we can to try to avoid, both at the outset and at the critical time of the I-829 filing. Sometimes some, or even most, or even all of the required jobs for a particular project, for all of the investors in that project, are created. How do we look for that? We look for the documentation presented in the I-956F that shows what the status of the project is and what the financing sources are and how the financing sources have already been deployed toward job creation. Sometimes the job creation is entirely or almost entirely prospective, which means that not all the jobs have been created yet for all of the investors in that project. In that instance, we've got to review the documentation to make sure that it states a feasibility prospectively for all of the jobs to eventually be created within the policy window for job creation, which is 2.5 years from the time that the I-526E petition is approved. So we can see by that policy standard that we've got a rolling 2.5-year window for job creation. It is investor by investor. The other thing to keep in mind is that although the 526E and the associated 956F for the project must establish sufficient job creation within that 2.5-year window, ultimately, the job creation is tested at the I-829 stage. At that point, the petition looking back must establish that all the prospective job creation that we put out at the 526E stage have been borne out and the jobs have been created. Sometimes that's not the case, and the jobs have not all been created for various reasons. There might be project delays. There might have been natural disasters. There may have been macroeconomic factors. And sometimes, thankfully, rarely enough, but sometimes there's also fraud involved in why a project has not completed job creation. In each of these more complex scenarios, a deep dive into the facts and the underlying documentation are critical to be able to salvage that I-829 petition for the affected investor, and often many investors in a particular project.